This week, we give our first impressions of the 2021 Toyota Venza. We talk about the cost of owning certain car brands over time and what we are thankful for in this crazy year of 2020. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome to Talking Cars. I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm John Lincove.
And I'm Mike Quincy.
This week, we are talking about first impressions of the 2021 Toyota Venza. So the Venza had a bit of a hiatus for about 6 years and has returned as a 2021 model with the Venza name. Just quick specs, a 219 horsepower, 2.5 liter four-cylinder hybrid. Only comes as a hybrid engine, or powertrain, continuously variable transmission, all-wheel drive, 32,470 to 39,800 price range with the $1,175 destination charge. Claimed fuel economy, 39 miles per gallon. Really impressive. Standard Toyota Safety Sense 2.0, which includes forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, blind spot warning. Now, standard was always an option outside of that package. Rear cross traffic warning, lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, automatic high beams, rear seat reminder. That system that we've talked about from a child safety side of letting you know if there's a child in the back seat. This vehicle, as Toyota has described it, is kind of striking a balance between Toyota and Lexus in terms of feel, refinement, features. I think we wrote it's like a Toyota with a sprinkle of Lexus fairy dust on it, which I enjoyed. But it also splits the difference in size, more like a Ford Edge, Nissan Murano in that kind of mid-sized two-row SUV. So we had exposure twice. We rented from Toyota a limited version, but have since also purchased recently our own XLE trim of the Venza. So I'm going to go to you, John, first. Your thoughts on the Toyota Venza?
So I didn't drive the Limited, which comes with a very unique panoramic sunroof that has an automatic opacity where you could press a button, not auto. I mean, you press a button, obviously you tell it what to do, but it will change the opacity level so that it doesn't have a shade, but it could get darker or, it could let in less light or more light. So
it's like transition sunglasses almost.
As long as they're not transitions for distance and
right.
reading, because goodness knows I'm there soon. But it's so I heard people talk about that, but I'd love to hear what you guys talk about. So I didn't drive that unique one. I drove ours, which is a very nice vehicle. And I think it is long needed by Toyota because you really only had a RAV4 or a Highlander. I would say that this is, so it's not quite Lexus, but it's a heck of a lot more Lexus worthy than, for example, a Lexus NX, which I don't understand it's kind of a poor effort in my opinion from Lexus. I didn't notice the narrowness. Kids. I think I had both kids in it in the back, maybe with my wife. Because I can't remember, but I didn't ever find the narrowness a problem. It felt roomy without any panoramic roof, a lot of headroom. Controls were so. It drove nicely. It was an unremarkable vehicle for the most part for me. But
the fact that you don't remember the width means it's probably okay.
Yeah. It's just, it was unremarkable. Fuel economy, really nice. I do remember one of the easier Toyotas to keep on EV mode, in the sense that sometimes I find Toyotas a little, I'm not sure, is it to save the battery or what the reason is, but harder, a little more driving with an egg underneath the throttle, for example, the gas pedal, to keep it in EV mode versus some other manufacturers. So a needed vehicle. I do know a number of people who were waiting for it, looking for it, and then ended up going with something else just because it took a while to get this vehicle. So I think Toyota will have a hit on their hands as they continue to hybridize and all-wheel drive hybridize their lineup. So interesting product, definitely needed.
Yep. Mike, similar thoughts?
Well, I mean, to me, the Venza looks and feels like a wagon, which I like. The size for me is just right. I'm not a big proponent of 3-row seatings just because I find I never ever use them. So why pay for it? Why carry around the extra weight? So to me, the Venza concept totally works. The hybrid powertrain, excellent fuel economy, promising reliability. Toyota's really good with this technology as far as reliability goes. I thought the ride was comfortable. The cabin is pretty quiet. But the deal breaker here is the controls. I mean, John, you touched on it, but many buttons are flush. They don't respond to commands immediately. I definitely miss the hard buttons for the volume and the tuning. I mean, this is a surprise departure from my perspective, because just about every Toyota that we've tested in the last few years hasn't gone this route. This decision to make this kind of Venza futuristic in that perspective is a real mystery to me.
And the hidden ignition button,
right?
That blocks off a lot of the storage underneath the front center console, the bottom of the center console, front of the dash. That's bizarre.
Yeah, so some of the things Toyota usually gets right, I think they kind of messed up on this one.
Yeah, it's not like Toyota to have the controls. One thing I noted about the controls is there was a detachment. I equated it to operating something when you're in a mirror. When the control you're operating is here, but the indicator of what you're changing is up here. They're not in the same place. I was happy for the most part with the Venza. I really like the size. I do think it will appeal as that balance between Toyota and Lexus. I think it hits the mark in styling and fit and finish and all of that. The powertrain is good, except I'm going to give this little kind of caveat. When you downshift or you ask for extra power, very similar to the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, that engine comes on and it is loud. And I typically look to a hybrid for quiet, and it is loud, and it also has some pretty significant road noise. Again, probably a tire related item, but on roughly surfaced roads, it is a roar. That cabin, when you're under power on a rough road, it's a roar, to the point where I ended up, increasing the audio volume. Then I would come to a stop and I'm like, why is the radio blaring? Because I had to. So I think there's those two things, controls, but for the most part, very pleasant. I think of it, we talked about, it's a great height access, despite its slopey shape, great height for elderly people or people who don't like that climb or duck. I think of my parents, my 80-year-old parents. It would be awesome. It's just perfect to get into. And I think it will be a very appealing car. I would like to see a little more quiet, a little better focus on controls.
Interesting point, Jen, that you bring up, because the Toyota Sienna that we rented from the manufacturer, from Toyota, and we have a first drive on consumerreports.org, the RAV4 hybrid, not to the same extent as the Highlander hybrid, but still a little bit, all get very, very loud when that engine kicks in. And in my experience, the Sienna kicked in almost immediately. Like, it was very hard to drive under EV mode. And sure, I get it. People are saying, well, yes, it's going to be super quiet and you'll pick up other noise. It's going to be a difference between silence and not. But it's almost as if maybe for weight savings or what have you, there's not as much sound deadening. Maybe they need those NVH trays, Jen, that we've talked about in past episodes. But whatever it is that you really notice it, and it's a raucous sound, and I know that at times we talked about Audi and Volkswagen 4-cylinder engines at one point sounding agricultural. This is another it's a slightly offensive noise, and it may turn people off, particularly if they're used to driving a V6 Highlander, for example, or a V6 Sienna, for example, and then they get into the hybrid. So, yes, does it knock Toyota off of a pedestal or a perch for being such a great, reliable, high performing vehicles? No, but it's something that is noticeable, and it will be noticeable as more and more vehicles are hybridized.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit more than the differentiation between silence and noise. I do think it's prominent enough that you say, this is actual real noise. This isn't just going from silence to. But so certainly test drive it. As I said, we've purchased our own. It will be through the test program, through all of the many detailed tests, and we will have a full report on it shortly. So first impressions of the Toyota Venza. We wanted to take a quick second to tell you about a new initiative we're introducing on the podcast, which is our Talking Cars donation program. For those of you that don't know, Consumer Reports is a nonprofit organization, and we're able to do all of the work we do, including anonymously buying our test cars and producing this show, through memberships to our website and magazine, as well as through donations. What the Talking Cars donation program will do is allow loyal Talking Cars fans to support the show, assist in supporting the costs of producing the podcast, as well as support all of the work CR does to keep consumers safe. You'll be able to contribute either as a one-time donation or on a monthly basis. Even $5 a month really helps. Go to cr.org/givetalkingcars and find out more. Moving on, our favorite part of the episodes is your audience questions. As always, keep them coming. Comments, questions, video questions, talkingcars@icloud.com. So the first this week is from Jeff from Columbia, Missouri. And Jeff writes, I just read the Consumer Reports article, What It Costs to Own These Brands Over Time, and was hoping for some clarification regarding BMW. Why are BMWs the lowest cost to maintain for 5 years, but the most expensive, and he puts in parentheses, by a lot, over 10 years? John Linkoff, what's the answer for Jeff on BMW?
Well, at the basic sense, BMW includes 3 years of scheduled maintenance included in the purchase. Now, it used to be 4 years, and it's changed. Anything from 2017 forward was 3 years. Anything from 2015 and 16 was 4 years. So you're having vehicles that still are current models. They're still under a warranty, basically. So something from 2016 now, 2020. You didn't pay for anything. You brought it in there for a lot of the wear parts and a lot of the regularly scheduled maintenance, and it was just included. All the other manufacturers, particularly the Germans, but most manufacturers, they may have a 1 or 2 year, but a lot of them, as you go up, now you have to pay. You have a program where you pay up. You buy a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year program, whatever it is, of prepay, or you're paying each time you go in. So that's helping BMW really drop its costs on the front side. But then as you see on the back side, and if you look at our cost of car ownership story on consumerreports.org, you see that, in year 10, for 2010 models, the cost is $910 versus $59 for the first years. So 2015 models. So which is in year 5. So it's really just that program is keeping BMWs low cost to begin with. Then you're getting very expensive brake, changes and fluid changes and just regularly scheduled maintenance on top of any other repairs and such for the parts. So there you go.
Yeah. And Mike, you had some thoughts on yes, BMW maintenance costs in their own right, that they tend to be elevated, but how sometimes what you select for your car can lead to maintenance later or higher costs later.
Correct. I mean, when you go into the car buying decision process, this is something to keep in mind. And to your point, Jen, it's like, does your new vehicle require premium fuel? Is it going to be the tires that are on your vehicle? Are they going to be expensive to replace? I mean, the joke was, years ago, BMW used to stand for break my wallet. And we're seeing after the warranty gets over, well, there might be some truth to there.
So yeah. So it's not just the immediate. Yeah, it all looks nice, but really thinking about down the road. So great question, Jeff. The second question comes from Rob from Portland, Oregon. I've been seeing matrix LED headlights on a lot of luxury European cars, but those headlights aren't allowed here in the US. Why aren't they allowed? And is CR working on getting them approved by the government? So I'm going to take this one if you guys don't.
Because you're the headlight expert.
Sorry. But the first thing is kind of just explaining what matrix beam headlights do. So this matrix beam is really kind of a brand name from Audi. The more general term is adaptive driving beam. But what they do essentially is take the LEDs, often an LED array, and in a nutshell, your high beams are on all of the time. but they eliminate glare by singularly being able to shut off individual elements of that LED array, either for someone that you're following, and it almost looks like a square that's shaded, or for oncoming traffic. So as a driver, you're getting the benefit of additional light, high beam level light, without the potential for glare. So Rob is correct. The current federal motor vehicle safety standards, in 108 in this case, that are govern lighting, have certain aspects that disallow, even NHTSA has said, the way the standard's written, they disallow this adaptive driving beam because they ask for two things. One, they ask for low beam photometry, which is the measure of light output, which there is really no low beam with adaptive driving beam. And they ask for a switch between high beam, low beam, high beam, low beam. So the way the regs are currently written, you can't have these adaptive driving beam. Many manufacturers have petitioned for allowance to them. They've granted some of those. And it kind of talks to the policy side of CR in that in 2018, there was what they call a notice of proposed rulemaking, which is kind of the first step in changing standards that would update the standards to allow the advanced adaptive driving beam. And CR in this case absolutely commented that yes, anything that provides additional seeing distance, additional visibility is a good thing, always countering glare. The proposed rulemaking had not just the allowance, but performance standards to go with it. That's where it kind of stopped. We have not seen a final rule, which would be the update to that standard. In fact, we've seen very little related to updated standards in the past few years. So who knows if that's going to change, when that's going to change, but certainly the process has begun to allow those adaptive driving beam, including matrix LEDs, onto U.S. roads. And I do think they would be beneficial. We tried them on an Audi A8 years ago, and we thought they were pretty darn good because they did absolutely provide additional visibility. So hopefully, Rob, that gives you some information as to where we're at in the United States. And again, to your point, all over Europe. So next question comes from Tim from Wisconsin. I recently bought a used Ford Mustang convertible, which will spend the winter in the garage. I plan to use a car cover for protection, and I'm wondering if it's better to store the car with the convertible top up, in place, or folded. Mike Quitzy, as an ex-used Mustang owner, admittedly a hardtop, what advice do you have for Tim?
Well, first, congratulations getting a Mustang convertible. Super cool. Talked to Consumer Reports chief mechanic, Big John Ibbotson, who said convertibles should be stored with the top up. The reason being that if you store the convertible with the top up, it helps to keep its shape. And even if it's garaged, if you store the convertible with the top down, moisture can collect in the folds. So leaving it up will definitely help it keep it clean and dry. So, but great question. And sadly, as us in the Northeast, we're putting all our fun cars away for the season. And I guess where you live also is what you have to deal with also. So
maybe
too bad
you
gotta put your convertible away.
Right. Good. So there's your answer, Tim. Put it up. The last question is from Joel. Joel says, I'm a bona fide talking cars groupie. Thank you, Joel. I was privileged to have visited your test track in Connecticut as an audience member for the live event, and I'm now looking for your help. Well, thanks, Joel. My wife is in the market for a 3-row SUV to take care of our 3 grandchildren. We have narrowed it down to the following vehicles: Mazda CX-9 Grand Touring, Toyota Highlander Limited, and Subaru Ascent Limited with the middle row bench seat. My wife likes to keep her cars for years and would love to hear your thoughts. John, what is your advice for Joel and his wife?
Super interesting. So our reliability data is out. Our newest reliability data is out, and it in one way it has an impact on my choice, and on another way it doesn't. So I would say that I would knock the Mazda CX-9 out because it's a small, curved, slightly tight vehicle, and I don't know what age all the grandchildren are. Are they going to be 3rd row grandchildren? Are they all going to be 2nd row grandchildren in cars? So some of that is, can they fit 3 across? That may, so depending on that, as much as I like the CX-9 for driving, I'd knock that out. So you left with the Subaru and the Highlander. I would say the Subaru, simply because it's such a big vehicle and it's easy to get into. I'm also just not a huge fan of Toyota Highlander. So I'll go that way. But people should check the reliability out on consumerreports.org for, just to make sure that they're up to date. Be it the Highlander has a higher reliability rating.
Right, for sure. And Mike, any disparity to what John's giving?
Well, it wouldn't be me being on Talking in Cars without that. So, from your list, actually, I would go with the Highlander and I would go with the hybrid version. We were talking about Toyota hybrids earlier, and I'm still sold on these cars. I'm sold on the reliability. I'm sold on the fuel economy. The controls are super easy. Lots of standard safety features on the Highlander. But I hate to say this, but have you considered the Kia Telluride? Because that wasn't in your list. It's one of the top rated models. Consumer Reports testing for 3-row SUVs. It's super easy to drive. It's very roomy, and we all really love it. So I would put that on your list. But if you're just sticking to the 3, I'm going with the Highlander.
So this is going to be bad, poor Joel. I said, of the list that Joel provided, I would go with the CX-9. So we've all said something different. Obviously, Joel, that you've narrowed it down to a very good group. And the reason I said CX-9 was thinking grandchildren. And again, I'm making some assumptions here and wanting to drive a nice... is that the grandchildren are probably not with Joel and his wife all of the time. And that for those times when they're not, the CX-9 is a pretty nice driving car. Reliability's good, etc. So that's where I was leaning. Maybe my assumptions are wrong. And Joel, you'll have to tease out what we've all said here. But to Mike's point, I also wrote down here, please take a look at the Kia Telluride. That, to me, strikes a balance between kind of the softness of the Highlander and maybe the sportiness of the Mazda CX-9, but also gets rid of that slopiness, is a very roomy vehicle, reliable, etc. So you didn't have it on the list, but take a look at it. So this brings us to our Thanksgiving week. There is no question that it has been a crazy ride for the last 8 or 9 months. And certainly I find myself taking things like, I'm thankful for the health of my friends and family. I'm not taking that for granted this year. And I do think this year has changed maybe what we're thankful for in different ways. So you guys, I'm curious, any particular things you find yourselves thankful for in the auto space, in the personal space? Mike Quincy, we're going to go to you first.
Well, I mean, putting aside the obvious, which is what you just mentioned, we're always thankful for our friends and our family and our good health and all that stuff. But thinking about what I was going to say today, I thought, I'm really thankful that I work for an organization that has so seamlessly transitioned to work at home. I really think it's remarkable what Consumer Reports has done. I feel really lucky to have like my office chair, a full-size keyboard, and a big monitor. I mean, I thought I'm going to be working at home how many months, and I'm going to work on my tiny little laptop and stuff like that. But Consumer Reports said, make sure you have all the equipment that you need so you can do your job. Consumer Reports has been so incredibly proactive with taking into account our safety as our number one priority. And I've never been prouder to work for Consumer Reports. And I know that sounds like I'm just sucking up, but I'm very grateful that this organization has cared about us, the people that work here more than anything else. And for all the Consumer Reports members out there, we haven't missed a beat. We're still publishing. We're still testing products. We're still banging it out. So from a personal perspective, that's one of the things I'm grateful for. As far as the car world goes, I'm thankful for the sheer variety of models out there. I mean, I was looking back on the last several months of CR test groups, and we've tested all sizes of SUVs, sports sedans, cutting-edge EVs, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, a bunch of sports sedans and regular hatchbacks. I mean, consumers have never had such an incredible amount of choices out there. I mean, it's a great time to be shopping for a new car because there are so many out there that are fantastic. So that's where I am in my own little headspace for this Thanksgiving.
Yes, like you say, in addition to the obvious ones, John, anything that strikes you as being something particularly important to be thankful for?
Yeah, thinking through it, really happy that the auto industry wasn't decimated the same way that it was at the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. There wasn't a necessary bailout in the sense that we didn't have to see dealerships closing permanently. We didn't have to see people laid off from General Motors or Ford or Chrysler, FCA, Fiat Chrysler, America, or other manufacturers in the same numbers. I'm not ignoring that there might have been some dealers that were forced to close. They just couldn't manage for the few months, or they, they were on the edge. They had to be sold. I understand that, but you don't see the same level of industry decimation. And I could look through and say, yes, hospitals are having a problem, or, lawn care. I mean, there are industries that are having problems. Restaurants are having issues. Retail stores are having problems. I get it. But for our industry, looking at it this way, there's just not that toll that was taken at the last time we had such a crisis in the country. So I'm happy for that. I'm happy for people who are able to at least keep their jobs, and that there was a rebound after a couple of months of slow sales and plants shut down. That they did restart, and you're going to have plants closing and opening. Particularly, it seems a little more so with the domestics, where they retooling and changing the model mix. And they're not going to. They have an older plant and they have something newer. I get that, but that's what I'm thankful for. Personally, I don't have anything to complain about. I'm not sounding greedy, just more of I'm very fortunate. Family's employed, family's healthy. What more could I ask for?
I know, and I think that's huge. Just the fact that you can say I'm fine and be grateful for I'm fine is huge. It's huge. Yeah, so I'm very similarly, I don't take for granted two things. I'm going to start with the auto industry side for me, and at the risk of sounding like the cornball mom, again, 5 years now since my daughter drove, I'm now putting my 16-year-old boy, much higher risk, into cars for the first time. Soon, at January 6th, is his license exam. And it's an angst time for a parent. Mike, I know you've been through it. John, you're not quite there yet. But it's like throwing your kid into a shark tank in a weird sort of way. You've taught them all the things you could transfer for their own driving. But there's so many others that we know are not especially attentive drivers out there. I am thankful for cars that have so much safety, both crash protection and crash avoidance features built into them to have the back of my kids, who I'm now putting out into the shark tank. And it really comes home every time I think of him now going on his own without me or someone else in the car. Huge. And then personally, very similar to you, Mike, I'm very thankful for what has become acceptable. It's okay to be in a sweatshirt in your dining room at a meeting. You don't have to be in a shirt and tie, and maybe perhaps even more productive. It's okay to have your kids running in the background or on your lap. I think of that old segment with the guy giving the interview and his kid toddled in on the walker and he's like, oh my gosh, that was only a couple years ago. It's a daily occurrence now. And I think we will be forever changed in the way we work, in what's acceptable, in our balance of home life, homework balance, in a good way. So much to be thankful for at this Thanksgiving week. To all of you, we are thankful for you, for listening, for watching. Truly, and I think we've said it before, this is one of the favorite parts of our jobs. So without you listening to us and our banter, we wouldn't have it. So thankful for all of you. Happy Thanksgiving. Be safe, be well in the coming holidays. Groups, as you group together with family and friends, be careful. Keep the questions, keep the videos coming, talkingcars@icloud.com. More information on anything we talked about will be in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.